Okay, wow, Steve, those were 10 powerful points. So how do these 10 principles of exponential thinking transfer to the small group ministry world?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things. And with every one of your churches, it's going to be a little bit different of how it's going to shape and kind of mold who you are on each one of these points. But overall, think through the macro of, you're choosing between growth over control. So you're trying to go, okay, how do I match what the New Testament did all through the books and the letters and the epistles of how, growth always played the dominance over trying to control everything. Then there's also a point where it can also, when it's linked with a church-wide campaign, is being able to say, how can it help build a culture of groups for me and my ministry? But it also will help you understand that when Jesus chose the disciples, he started out by saying, hey, follow me. And then it was die for me 3 years later. And when you lowering the barriers of people, moving into leadership, what you have, if you have a pathway for that, then it's going to be extremely fruitful for you as you have exponential thinking. But let me because a lot of times you can hear Rick's talk and you can kind of know the story of Saddleback or small groups, and you can think, oh my gosh, they have it all together. But let me take you all the way back to 2002 and kind of just give you the backdrop. Rick shared this to our staff meeting, years and years later after the event. But what happened in that moment, Rick kind of gave a similar talk, but he walked into our management meeting and you could tell he had something on his mind, and he just kind of said, he kind of looked around, and he looked over to me and he said, hey Steve, how many groups do we typically start a year? And I said, well, generally in a year we'll start about, with our connection strategy, we'll start about 200 to 300 groups a year. Like a senior pastor, he goes, oh great, so 300. And I go, well, that's 3. And he took the 300 and he goes, what I want to do is I want to talk to you guys about exponential thinking. He kind of went through these 10 points. And at the conclusion of this talk, which by the way, you get the shorter version of the talk, but at the conclusion of this, he just said, we normally start about 300 groups. I want to add a 0 to it. And I want you guys to figure out how can we start 3,000 groups. And the great thing is, Rick said, hey, this isn't Steve's problem. This is all of y'all's problem. I mean, this is something I want you all to work on because it's a church-wide initiative. And so what happened through all that is that, it set us into, kind of working through a number of different aspects. Okay, by listing out what are the barriers? What are all of the barriers that stop people from saying, hey, I could lead a small group? And as you start to, go through this whole exercise, then you start to understand this is how we came up with the host strategy, which kind of led to the two friend strategy. If you don't know the host strategy, it's, have a heart for people, being willing to open up a place, serve a snack and, turn on the video. At that time, it was the VCR version, then it was the DVD version, and now it's the streaming version. But what happens in all that is that we start to understand that, we are taking away the barriers that were causing the issues inside our church family to see the church growth that we wanted to see, not only in our small groups, but in conversions and discipleship and people get into serving and into ministry and so many other pieces with it. But what happens is that you start to understand that during this time, we figured out the host strategy, and we said, hey, Rick, if you're saying, because we realized we had more people with the gift of hospitality than with the gift of teaching. And so what this whole exponential process went to is helping us understand, okay, what are the things that we need? And that's the master teacher into every group. And that's where our video curriculum strategy came from. And then we needed to understand, we had to have a pathway for group leaders to go on that took them from come and see to come and die. And then the whole aspect of trying to figure out, okay, what are all the tools and the resources that we need to create for them in this whole process. And when you see it play out, if you go back to 2002, we had, and don't get lost by the numbers, but we had about 825 groups and at Saddleback Church adult groups. And then what happened is Rick, this is the release of Purpose-Driven Life. And this was our very first campaign, a lot of excitement built around. And Rick said, I've been at this church 25 years. If this church has touched your life, I want you to consider hosting a group. And he went through, the whole thing. If you have a heart for people, if you can open up a place, and that can be any place. It can be, your clubhouse in your apartment complex. It could be your house. You could be, your office space. It could be a coffee shop. It predominantly was people's homes. But if you can open up a place, I want to encourage you to start, just to jump onto this experience of a church-wide campaign. And it all bubbled out of these 10 principles of exponential thinking. Well, what happened is that, Rick was praying for 3,000, and it's true. 3,023 people signed up to host a group. Now, what happened on the backside is where the big learnings came from. And that is that, we were freaked out about, the stats on the backside, because when we looked at the 3,023 that signed up, about 900 of them were what we call risky groups. And those risky groups were people that, either they weren't a follower of Christ, or they weren't in our database. And so what happened is we were trying to collapse all these to people that were what we considered to be safe people. And in that whole process, we ended up after collapsing, we got about 2,154 groups going through the campaign. And we were happy and rocking with that. We gave out the VCR curriculum at the time. We had the booklets. We had everything, locked and loaded and all that. And this exponential process was well on to its way. Now, we're going to talk, Derek and I are going to do a show in a couple months on church-wide, how to do a church-wide campaign. So you may have some questions about that, and we're going to cover that in nauseam. We're going to go through the 12 ingredients that make up a church-wide campaign. It's also in my book, Small Groups with Purpose, in chapter 17. But for the purpose of this show and talking about exponential thinking, what happened is that the process worked. What happened was we almost shut down what God was going to be doing in a really sweet way. Because it's true, we collapsed 900 groups. And after the church-wide campaign, we had about 1,456 groups that were continuing on. So we went from 825 groups. We went all the way up to 2,154 because we chickened out and we collapsed a bunch of them. And we came out of the campaign with about 1,456 groups rocking and rolling. So you can see it as either we lost 700 groups plus or minus, or we gained 700 groups plus or minus. We like to focus on the optimism. But what happened in that process is at a baptism service one time, and I'll speed date this for you, but we talked about, we had somebody there that was getting baptized. And part of our culture is when your small group is showing up and you're part of a group family, we want to pull a leader into the baptismal. And what happened in this particular time is that, when we said, okay, who's your leader? The guy in the baptismal was saying, I'm the leader. And what happened is that I'm just like going, part of the process was he had only been at Saddleback 4 weeks. He accepted Christ 2 weeks ago. And I was trying to connect all the dots in the baptismal as I'm talking to the guy. And what happened through that is that what we learned is that he accepted Christ in his small group because he did what we asked him to do. We asked him to gather, a few of his friends and just host a group. And through the curriculum, he accepted Christ. Now, this kind of, rocked our world in thinking, because when we were thinking HOST, we were just thinking Christians doing it. But what we discovered that is, if you've got two friends, you've got the gift of leadership. And it's just one of the pieces that kind of opened up through this whole aspect of exponential thinking that, we had such a conventional way of how to do things. And what we learned from it is that when you're willing to believe God in exponential ways, the Lord will do some amazing things. And so one of the principles I want you to capture from this, and Derek, you can kind of wrap up the show from this, but one of the things that I want you to capture is that to master change, and exponential thinking is a change agent. It'll change the way you think. It'll change the way you approach something. It'll change the way you do things. Because the whole thing behind exponential thinking is saying, hey, if you add a zero to something, it's going to force you to think through things in a different light. It's going to force you to kind of go through, okay, are we structuring too much for control, not enough for growth? Are we focusing too much for just trying to do programs and not building in a culture of groups? Are we lowering the barrier and just leaving people there, or are we lowering the barrier and discipling them through the whole process, which is what we do? But to master change, your paradigm must switch from what you will lose to what you will gain.